I moved into my apartment on a Tuesday in late September, and by Thursday night I was convinced my upstairs neighbour was trying to tell me something. The music started around 8 p.m. Soft at first, just the low thrum of a bass line bleeding through the ceiling. I was unpacking boxes in my living room, trying to decide if my bookshelf looked better against the window or the wall, when I heard it. Something indie, maybe alternative, with this melancholy guitar that made me stop what I was doing and just listen. Friday night it happened again. Same time, same vibe, but a different song. I was making dinner, chopping vegetables for a stir-fry, and the music drifted down like he was playing it just for me. I found myself cooking slower, taking my time with each cut, each stir of the pan, just so I could keep listening. There was something intimate about it, like being invited into someone's private moment without actually being there. Saturday I was reading on my couch when the music started, and this time it was loud enough that I could make out lyrics. Something about wanting and waiting and the space between people. I sat there with my book open on my lap, not reading anymore, just staring at the ceiling and wondering about the person up there, wondering what he looked like, what made him choose these particular songs, whether he knew I could hear them. By Sunday, I was actively waiting for 8 p.m. I'd showered early, made myself comfortable on the couch with a beer I didn't really want, and when the first notes came through the ceiling, I actually smiled. This was getting ridiculous. I was developing a routine around my neighbour's music habits, but I couldn't help it. There was something about those songs, the way they seemed to speak directly to feelings I'd been trying not to examine too closely since my last relationship ended 6 months ago. Monday night I was carrying groceries up the stairs when I finally saw him. He was coming down as I was going up, and we did that awkward dance where you both try to move to the same side. He laughed, this warm, genuine sound, and said sorry in a voice that matched the music perfectly. Deep and a little rough around the edges. He was tall, maybe 6'1", with dark curly hair that fell into his eyes, and this slight scruff on his jaw that he touched when he smiled. He was wearing a faded band t-shirt and jeans with paint stains on them. "I'm Caspian," he said, holding out his hand. 3B. I shook it, feeling the calluses on his palm, and told him my name was James, apartment 2B, right below him. "I know," he said, and something in the way he said it made my stomach flip. Then he was past me, jogging down the stairs, and I was left standing there with a bag of groceries in each hand, wondering what the hell just happened. That night the music was different, louder, more energetic, with this driving beat that made me want to move. I found myself pacing my apartment, too restless to sit still, too aware of every sound from above. I could hear him walking around, could track his movement from room to room by the creak of floorboards. It felt invasive, knowing so much about someone's private space, but I couldn't stop listening. Around 9:30 my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hey neighbour, can you hear my music?" I stared at the screen, my heart doing something complicated in my chest. "How did he get my number?" I typed back. "Yeah, I can hear it." His response came immediately. "Good." Then he sent another text, turning it up, and he did. The volume increased just enough that I could hear every word, every instrument, every breath the singer took. I sat down on my couch, phone in hand, not sure what to do with this information. Was he flirting with me? Was this just friendly neighbour stuff? I'd been out since college, had dated guys, had relationships, but I'd never been good at reading signals, especially not signals that came through ceiling plaster and text messages. I typed, "How did you get my number?" he replied, building directory on the landlord's website, then added, "Hope that's not creepy." I thought about it. Thought about him looking me up, making the effort to reach out. It should have felt weird, but instead it felt intentional, like he'd been thinking about me the same way I'd been thinking about him. I wrote back, not creepy, then after a moment added, "I like your taste in music." The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally he sent, "Maybe you could come up sometime and I could play you my favourites." My mouth went dry. That was definitely flirting. That was absolutely, unmistakably flirting. I stared at the message for a full minute before typing, "Yeah, I'd like that." His response was just a simple, "Cool," followed by, "How about tomorrow night?" I said yes before I could overthink it. I spent all of Tuesday distracted. At work I kept checking my phone. rereading our brief text exchange like I was trying to decode some hidden meaning. My coworker Rachel noticed and asked if I was okay. I told her I was just tired. She gave me this look that said she didn't believe me but was nice enough not to push. At lunch, I went to the coffee shop on the corner and ordered my usual. But when the barista asked if I wanted anything else, I found myself saying yes and getting a second coffee, a pastry, thinking maybe I could bring them to Caspian as an excuse to talk to him before tonight. But I chickened out. I walked up to my building with both coffees, rode the elevator to the 3rd floor, stood outside apartment 3B for a solid 2 minutes, then turned around and went back downstairs. The second coffee went cold on my kitchen counter, while I called myself every kind of coward. 7 p.m. I started getting ready. I showered, changed clothes 3 times, settled on jeans and a dark green Henley that my ex used to say brought out my eyes. Then I felt weird about wearing something my ex liked, changed into a plain black t-shirt, then changed back to the Henley because the black t-shirt made me look like I was trying too hard to be casual. By 7:45 I was sitting on my couch, leg bouncing with nervous energy, watching the clock on my phone tick toward 8. At exactly 8 p.m. my phone buzzed. "Come on up." I took a breath, left my apartment and climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. My hand was shaking slightly when I knocked on his door. He opened it almost immediately, like he'd been waiting on the other side, and the smile he gave me made every anxious moment of the last hour worth it. His apartment was the same layout as mine, but completely different. Where I had bare walls and half-unpacked boxes, he had art everywhere. Paintings, sketches, photographs in mismatched frames. A record player sat on a bookshelf overflowing with vinyl. His furniture was worn and comfortable looking, the kind of stuff that invited you to sink in and stay a while. It smelled like coffee and something spicy, maybe incense. "I like what you've done with the place," I said, and he laughed. "I've been here 2 years. I should hope it looks decent by now. You just moved in, right?" I nodded, told him about the job transfer that brought me to the city, the frantic apartment search, the relief of finding this place even though it was smaller than what I'd had before. He listened with his full attention, leaning against the kitchen counter with his arms crossed, eyes on my face the entire time. He offered me a beer, and I accepted. We ended up on his couch, not quite touching, but close enough that I was aware of the heat of him beside me. He told me about his work as a freelance graphic designer, how he'd moved here from a small town upstate where everyone knew everyone, and being gay meant being either invisible or a target. I told him I understood, shared my own coming out story, the way my parents had handled it with confused acceptance, my sister's fierce protectiveness, the boyfriend in college who taught me it was okay to want what I wanted. The conversation flowed easily, naturally, punctuated by comfortable silences where we just sat and smiled at each other like idiots. At some point he put on a record, something jazzy and low, and I realized this was the first time I was hearing his music from the source, instead of through my ceiling. It sounded richer, fuller, and I told him so. He looked pleased, said music was better when shared. Around 10 he asked if I was hungry. I realized I'd been too nervous to eat dinner and said yes. He ordered Thai food from a place he promised had the best pad see ew in the city, and while we waited he showed me his record collection. He pulled out albums one by one, telling me stories about where he'd found them, which ones had gotten him through breakups or celebrated good news. His hands were gentle with the vinyl, reverent, and I found myself watching those hands more than the records. When the food arrived, we sat on his floor with the containers spread between us, eating with chopsticks and talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his last relationship, a guy who wanted him to be less messy, more conventional, someone who fit into neat boxes. I told him about my ex who'd said I was too intense, too emotional, that I felt things too deeply. Caspian looked at me then with something soft in his eyes and said he didn't think a person could feel too deeply, that the world needed more people who were willing to really feel. Something shifted in that moment. The air between us became charged, heavy with possibility. I could see him deciding something, working up courage, and then he said, "I've been playing music for you, every night since you moved in. I wanted you to hear it, wanted you to know I was thinking about you." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. I said, I was listening, every night, waiting for 8 p.m, like it was an appointment I couldn't miss. He smiled, this slow spreading thing that transformed his whole face. Yeah, I said. Then, because I was tired of being careful, tired of second-guessing, I added, I kept wondering about you. what you looked like, whether you were playing those songs for someone special." "I was," he said quietly. "I was playing them for you. I just didn't know if you'd understand, if you'd want to understand." I shifted closer, closing the small distance between us. "I understand," I said. "I want to understand." And then, because words felt insufficient, I leaned in and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, both of us testing the waters. But then his hand came up to cut my jaw, and I made this small sound in the back of my throat, and the kiss deepened. He tasted like Thai basil and beer, and something uniquely him. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard, foreheads pressed together, and he was smiling. We stayed like that for a long moment, just existing in each other's space, before he pulled back enough to really look at me. His thumb traced my cheekbone, and he said, "I was hoping you'd come up here. I was hoping I hadn't misread everything." I laughed, shaky with relief and want, and told him I'd been hoping the same thing. That I'd carried 2 coffees to his door earlier and been too scared to knock. He kissed me again, slower this time, taking his time learning the shape of my mouth. We migrated from the floor to the couch, the empty food containers forgotten, but neither of us moved to change it. Neither of us moved to change it. The only sound was our breathing, the soft noises we made against each other's mouths. Eventually we had to come up for air. We sat tangled together on his couch, my head on his shoulder, his arm around my waist. He asked if I wanted to stay, watch a movie, keep hanging out. I said yes without hesitation. We put on something neither of us paid attention to, too busy stealing kisses during the opening credits, laughing when we realised we had no idea what the movie was even about. Around midnight I said I should probably go, even though I didn't want to. He walked me to the door, reluctant to let go of my hand. At the threshold he kissed me one more time, sweet and promising, and said, "Same time tomorrow?" I grinned and said, "I'll bring the coffee this time." He laughed and said he'd provide the music. Text from Caspian. "I can hear you walking," text from Caspian. "I can hear you walking around down there." "I like knowing you're right below me." I typed back, "I like knowing you're right above me." He sent a heart emoji, and then, "Sleep well, James." "I will," I wrote back, because for the first time in months I knew I actually would. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. I'd go to work, count down the hours until evening, rush home to shower and change. Some nights I went up to his place, some nights he came down to mine. We cooked together, ate takeout, listened to records, watched movies we never finished because we were too busy kissing. He showed me his art, sketches and paintings he'd never shown anyone else. I read him passages from my favourite books, the ones I'd marked up with notes in the margins. We talked about everything, our childhoods, our dreams, the things that scared us. He told me about moving to the city with nothing but a duffel bag and determination, working 3 jobs while building his portfolio. I told him about the promotion I'd turned down because it would have meant moving somewhere I didn't want to go, the way I'd disappointed my father who couldn't understand choosing happiness over prestige. One night, about a month after that first evening in his apartment, we were lying in his bed, the window open to let in the cool October air. He was tracing patterns on my chest, idle and content, and I was playing with his hair. He said, "I think I'm falling for you." Just like that, simple and honest. I felt my throat tighten with emotion. The good kind. The kind that means something real is happening. I said, "I think I already fell. I think I fell the first time I heard your music." He propped himself up on his elbow to look at me, eyes serious. "I mean it, James. This isn't casual for me. I don't do casual. I need you to know that." I reached up and pulled him down for a kiss, trying to pour everything I felt into it. When we broke apart, I said, "It's not casual for me either. I haven't felt like this in years, maybe ever." He smiled, relieved, and settled back against my chest. We fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and when I woke up in the middle of the night, I took a moment to just look at him. His face was peaceful in sleep, hair a mess on the pillow, one arm thrown across my waist like even unconscious he didn't want to let go. I thought about how a month ago I didn't know him, how my life had been quiet and lonely and small, how now it felt full of possibility. I'm not going to pretend it was all perfect. We had our moments of friction, times when his messiness drove my need for order crazy, when my overthinking exhausted his patience. But we talked through it, learned each other's languages, found compromises. He started keeping his place a little neater when he knew I was coming over. I started letting go of my rigid schedules, embracing spontaneity. 3 months in, on a Friday night in early December, he asked me to be his boyfriend officially. We were at his place, snow falling outside the window, a fire going in the small fireplace I hadn't even known worked. He'd cooked dinner, actually cooked instead of ordering in, and it was only slightly burned. We were sharing a bottle of wine on the couch when he turned to me and said, "I want to introduce you to people as my boyfriend. I want this to be official, real." I felt something warm and bright bloom in my chest. I said, "I want that too. I've wanted that for weeks, but I was too chicken to say it." He laughed and kissed me, tasting like wine and happiness. We spent the rest of the night making plans, talking about the future, about holidays and meeting each other's families and all the normal relationship things that felt extraordinary, because they were ours. Now it's been 8 months since I moved into apartment 2B. 8 months since I first heard music coming through my ceiling. Caspian still plays records every night around 8 p.m, but now I'm usually up there with him, dancing in his living room or cooking dinner or just existing in his space. Sometimes I'll be down in my apartment and I'll hear the music start and I'll smile, remembering how it all began. Last week he asked me to move in with him, said his lease was up for renewal and he wanted to get a bigger place, somewhere we could build a life together. I said yes immediately, no hesitation, no second guessing. We've started looking at apartments, places with room for both our stuff, somewhere we can make our own. My sister asked me the other day how I knew he was the one. I told her about the music, about how he'd been reaching out to me before we ever spoke, trying to connect in the only way he knew how, about how he turned it up when I said I could hear it, like he was saying, "Yes, I want you to hear me, I want you to know me." She got this soft look on her face and said that was the most romantic thing she'd ever heard. I think about that moment a lot, about Caspian sitting in his apartment, choosing songs he hoped I'd love, playing them loud enough to reach me, about me sitting below, listening, wondering, hoping, about all the ways we reach for each other, all the small brave gestures that say I see you, I want you, I'm here. About how sometimes love announces itself not with grand gestures but with music through the ceiling and a simple question. Can you hear me? And when you say yes, it gets louder, fuller, impossible to ignore. That's what love is, I think. Someone turning up the volume on all the best parts of life and inviting you to listen.